Hello everyone, this is Mrinal, and in this video we are going to discuss about the return values from a function. So we are going to talk about return keyword which is used in Python, and the types of function based on the return value. So we can also classify function based on the return value, that is void and non-void function, and we will also talk about the functions which are returning multiple values. So this is something unique about Python programming language as compared to the classical programming languages like C, C++, that it allows you to simply return multiple values, right? So first, we are going to talk about the return keyword. Now, return keyword, again, as it is a keyword, that means it has a specific function. It cannot be used as an identifier. So what function does it perform? It has two functions precisely. One is to terminate the function. For whatever condition you want your function to be terminated without completing its normal life cycle, we can use the return keyword to terminate it. And second is to return the value. Now that is a word meaning, right? So return the value that our function has actually calculated. That is one of the job, right? So let us look into an example to understand better. So I'll define a very simple function. So here you can see we have written a simple division kind of a function. So here we can understand the two functions of a return keyword. Now here we can see that return keyword will actually return a value, that is whatever the division, that is if I divide a by b, whatever the value will be calculated, that will be returned by this particular return keyword. And in this return keyword we can see that there is no value. So what it says that if b is equal to 0, that means if we are trying to divide a by 0, it should not do anything. It should not come to this particular division. Why? Because obviously a division by 0 is not allowed in any programming language, right? So it's a kind of a fail-safe mechanism. So let us just demonstrate it. And obviously I'll print it. And so it is giving me a 0.5 as usual. But if I write something of this sort, it will give me none. That is, it has not actually performed the division, because if I divide 10 by 0, it would throw me an error. So something of that sort. If I do 10 division by 0, so it will give me a division by 0 error. So this is these are the two functions of a return keyword, right? And another important point that we have to notice in here is that return will actually return the value, right? So it's your job to save it somewhere. So if you don't save it anywhere, it will just be wasted in that sense. So that's why we had to add print. But in previous examples of functions that we discussed, we didn't use any print explicitly in the function because the print was already there, right? So I hope it made sense. So next we are going to jump into, so the similar example is also given in here. So you can go through it and it will make more sense. The next thing that we are going to jump into is void function. So it's an idea of classification of a function based on what kind of value or whether a value is being returned by a function or not, right? So the first thing is a void function. So we have seen void function too many times. So if I have something of that sort, def ad, and if I pass a comma b as an parameters, and then I'll just simply write print a plus b, something of that sort, right? Now this is a void function. Why? Because it is not going to return anything. So if I call something of this sort, so 10 comma 20, so it will just simply print the answer. Now I cannot do anything with this particular variable. So if I do something with this type, like a is equal to, so every time it is getting printed. So if I just try and print a, so you can see a doesn't have any value in it, right? So I cannot do anything with the value that it has evaluated. So at certain times we might need to get the value from a function and perform some sort of an operation in it. So in that scenario we can use the return keyword. So I'll just redefine the function, something of this sort. So I'll write just ad1, so a comma b, and I'll just return it, return a plus b. And now let us see what happens. So now what I can actually do is I can call this function obviously, so 10 comma 20, but what else can I do is that I can assign this function to a variable like val, something of that sort, right? Now what it will actually do is calculate the sum of these two numbers, that is 10 and 20, and it will assign it, because obviously no, it's not equal to it, is assignment. It will assign the value to val. So if I execute of something of that sort, so actually it didn't get printed, but the value is stored in here. So if I do something of that sort, print val, so obviously I'm going to get 30. Now the interesting part is that I can perform operations on it. So if I want something of this sort, like times 2, it gets 60. I can also raise it to power. So this is an example of a non-void function. So that is what we talked about in here. So non-void functions. So non-void functions are functions that will return some sort of a value, right? And so it's a very simple idea. So void function will return no values actually, so we cannot use the value. So yes, return functions have their own applications where you don't need to return the value to the user. You are just performing some sort of an operations in it, like maybe getting value, something of that sort. So in that scenario you don't have to return anything. But there are certain scenarios where you actually have to get the value to perform some sort of an operation. So imagine you are performing some sort of arithmetic operation where you need the answer of an addition, a subtraction, a multiplication, and then you are going to finally perform a different operation. In that scenario, it's always good to have a non-void function. That is a function that will return some sort of a value. So it can return either a literal can be returned. Literal means any kind of a number. So if I do something of that sort, in place of this, if I just return 10 just for the sake of conversation, right? So val will always be 10. So if I write val, whatever value I pass in it, it really doesn't matter, it always will be 10. Because why? We are returning a literal. So literal is a kind of a constant. And then we can also return a variable. So in the previous example we saw it where we actually returned a. So it can be an example of returning a variable. So again, it really doesn't matter what value you are passing, it is always going to be the value of a. So if I execute it, 20, as simple as that. And it can also return an expression of some sort. So we have also seen this. So if I do something of this sort, a plus b, right? Now this we understand is an arithmetic operation. So now if I do that, it will make more sense. It will perform an addition between 20 and 30. It will finally return me the value 50. So I hope it makes sense. So the last part that we are going to look into is function returning multiple values. So yes, as I said, this is one of the interesting features that Python programming language actually offers. So it allows you to return multiple values. So what do I mean by that? So I'm going to modify this AD function and I'll write like arith, right? Something of that sort. Now what it allows is that I can perform multiple operations and return the answers simultaneously. So I can write something of that sort, like a times b and even a minus b, something of that sort. And now it works exactly fine, right? It actually doesn't throw me an error. So what is the rule for returning multiple values? The values, whatever it is, whether it's an expression, whether it is a literal or it's a variable, doesn't matter. It has to be separated by commas. As many values as you want you can return, but they have to be separated by comma. This is the rule. Another thing, let us check what kind of value actually this arithmetic function returns. The values that are returning, fine, but what kind of packaging is actually done? So what we are going to do, we are going to use the type function and we are going to write arith. So we can see all the values that are actually being passed is passed in a tuple data structure from our function that is actually returning multiple values, right? So that means we can actually save it in a tuple. That is one of the options, or we can directly go for tuple unpacking. That is, if we're aware that okay, I will my function arith will return 3 values in a tuple format, so I can directly assign it to 3 variables. So let me demonstrate what I mean by that. So I might have val1, val2, and val3, right? And I can assign my function to it, arith, and we can just write 20, 30, right? Now if I run it, it works perfectly fine. So now I can print the individual values. So what is val1? 50. Val2, because 20 times 30 is 600, fine, and val3 is minus 10, obviously. So this method is called tuple and unpacking. So we have written it here, so we can just directly unpack in variable. So one of the mechanism is that. Another is that we can obviously assign it to one single tuple. So if I do something of this sort and if I run it, so this particular val will have all the values that are being returned from this arith function in a tuple format. So if I just check it, what is the type of val1? So it will show me that, okay, val1 is a tuple, right? So because of the dynamic typing, whatever the data is being actually assigned to a value, that data type is actually taken by the variable itself, right? So that's why val becomes a tuple. So examples are given in here, so I guess it will make sense, similar kind of an example. So go through the blog post. I hope it will make sense, and if you like this video, give a thumbs up and stay tuned for the next one. So thank you for watching and see you in the next one.